Thanks. Okay, welcome everybody to the Arts and Creative Community Committee meeting, or AC3. It's been a while since we've had the whole group together. We've had several meetings of just the subcommittees over the last several months, and also been meeting fairly regularly with the co-chairs, Annette, Thomas, and Sean, as well as the occasional meeting with our city arts team, folks from different departments here at City Hall, a couple of whom are on the call here today. So I've been making lots of progress, and glad to be back with you all to meet and talk about the progress that we have made. Before I get into that anymore, I want to welcome Wanya as our interpreter. Wanya, it's good to see you again. And thanks for helping out today. So several things to cover today, mostly in the form of updates, but a big one that will be our focus of discussion. So I'll start with the updates. So last week we finally, it took a while to get here, but we were successful in getting an amendment to the city arts policy passed through City Council. So we're really excited about that. And I recognize that it's been a while since we've talked about this subject with you. So just a reminder, the main change to the city arts policy that we were successful in getting adopted or amended is that future years of this percent for the arts money can be, the operating funds can be a source of money for future years. And as you'll recall, currently and in the past, the source of money has always been capital funds. So the difference being capital money can only be spent on physical sort of long-term installations, which are wonderful. And we'll continue to do those things like murals and sculptures, et cetera. But the use of operating funds, operating city funds in the future will allow us to do non-capital projects. So they could be performance-based art, education-based art, more temporary art, things of that nature. So we're excited that there was strong support for that. And in future years, we'll be able to use money for that type of work. What that means for this group and the city arts team is each year, at a certain time of year, we'll have a discussion around sort of the split between operating funds and capital funds that we would recommend doing for the amount of money that we have. So in the future years, do we want X number of dollars to go towards capital projects and Y number of dollars to go towards non-capital projects? That's a decision that we'll talk about as a group and try and come to some consensus. We'll actually be getting into that a little bit in this meeting here. So that's an exciting update. And as you all know, back in July, I believe it was, we released the twin RFPs for the mural program and the public art installation program, or the non-mural program. And we are seeking organizations or consultants to partner with to help administer those funds. Doing this sort of in the absence of dedicated city staff to doing this sort of thing. We want to work with organizations to help administer those funds. And I wish we were just a little bit further along in that process to give you the announcement today, but what I can tell you is that we have tentatively selected 2 organizations, one for each of those programs. We're very excited about both. And there's just a couple of I's to dot and T's to cross before we can publicly announce it. But and really the way it works here at the city with contracts like that is the sort of public announcement of it, or when it becomes public, is sort of tied to the city council process or the city council cycle. So essentially we have to enter in a professional services agreement or a PSA contract with those organizations. And that contract has to be approved by city council. So once those items go before, as a draft, go before city council, then it's public information. So we're pretty much there, just a couple of minor details to work out. But we're very excited that we got some good proposals. We had a nice review team process and had strong consensus about who to select. And hopefully you'll be hearing about that soon. Any questions about that process or the amendment that I just mentioned? I know it's Monday morning and we haven't all had our coffee yet. Okay, no questions, that's fine.
Well, Kevin, will
Yes.
there be an increase to the AC3's budget if we now can allocate operating funds? or will the visual portion of that remain the same and an additional portion of operating funds?
Great question. Essentially, the amount won't change year to year because it'll still all be based on the 1% calculation. So we calculate all the large capital or infrastructure projects that we're doing as a city, total up how much those will cost, and then calculate 1% of that, and that's the amount that will go towards public art. So in the current year or the past year, we're talking about $236,000, right? So in future years, let's say it's the same amount. We, as an AC3 and the city arts team, will come together to talk about what would we recommend that split be? 100,000 for operating, 136,000 for capital, or whatever, 50-50, 75-20, whatever we think would be a good idea. That's the kind of discussion that we would have, but it wouldn't necessarily be an increase in the amount just because it's coming from a different funding source. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Any other questions on that? The next update that we wanted to give you, as you know, we've been talking for many months about developing a arts and culture plan. We're very close to having a draft of an RFP for that, and an RFP would be meant to find a consultant or a consultant team that specializes in developing arts and cultural plans, because there are design firms that specialize that, and they've done it in cities all over the country. So we'd be looking to find a firm to assist us as a team here to develop that. With obviously that whole development of that, the whole process would have heavy influence from this group, and the consultant would be an assist to us to put that together. It wouldn't be the primary driver or the primary author. That they would be an assist to us developing that. In any case, we're close to having a draft RFP put together to find that organization. And when the time comes to request proposals, we will form another review committee, and we would invite folks from this group to be part of that if they would like. And that doesn't mean that if you don't participate that you're not participating in that project. It's just purely about the review process, like reviewing proposals. And then once we select somebody, then we would kind of come back to this group, and this group would be involved from soup to nuts on that project. So we will release that RFP soon. Amanda's expressed an interest to be in that. We'll take a note of that. Thank you, Amanda. And then just a side note to that, we have been in conversations with folks at the county because we believe that a really effective and comprehensive city arts and culture plan would be looking at it from a regional perspective, looking at the city and the county together. We think there's interest, nothing finalized yet, but we think that there's interest from the county executive and some of his staff and participating with us on that. So just an update to let you know that the conversations are underway, and we hope to make a good case for them to be strong participants in that. We think that it would still have a pretty heavy focus on the city itself in that process, because so much of our arts and culture scene is weighted, is centered in the city. So that's obviously going to be a focus. But as you know, arts and culture know no boundaries for the most part. So we want to look at it from a big picture perspective. So that's a good update. Let me take a look at my list here and see if there's anything else I wanted to mention. I think that's it. Heather or anybody else from the city arts team, aside from what we're going to talk about with future funding, is there any other updates that we wanted to talk about today?
I think that covers it.
Oh, I just thought of one.
Oh.
Sorry. Just asking you made me think of it. Update on the Arts Council. So we obviously do not have an Arts Council anymore. It's been dissolved for years now, but there also have been many conversations underway, including several folks in this group here, to talk about how we might sort of chart a path forward to fill that void and create a new nonprofit arts alliance that is a partner with the city and the county, a partner with this group and the entire community, and a partner with all the other existing organizations. So as I understand, actually, Annette, I'm talking a lot here. Annette Jimenez Gleason, do you mind me putting you on the spot? Do you want to give an update on how we're proceeding with that?
Yeah, that's fine. Yes, so with this group and conversations with some other folks, we kind of developed a two-track path to developing this new organization from the ground up. So first step is Rock Arts. So I don't know if Blue wants to contribute anything to this part. Rock Arts United is going to lead a series of meetings, I think 3 meetings. The foundation will fund that series of meetings to get input from working artists and small arts groups on their needs. Mona developed a Google survey that also is going out for anyone who can't participate in those meetings. And Meg Norris, who is the new head of ACT Rochester, we met with Mona last week to offer feedback on, crafting the questions, not only for that Google survey, but also for the focus groups to get, the kind of input that's going to help inform creation of whatever, new structure is determined to be needed and will serve more effectively than in the past few years with the former Arts Council. So once those series of convenings are done, we're looking to have a larger convening with the large culturals, with Arts in the Loop, with this group, with the county, with business folks, potentially higher ed folks, and really look for your input on any representation that you think should be part of that conversation. Foundation also has worked with the Urban Institute to create kind of a white paper of what Rochester is developing, as well as case studies from a few other cities, including Cleveland. I think Blue will find that most relevant. And we will share that. Right now it's in draft form, but we also use that and the Arts in the Loop 5 city studies to develop a straw model for that larger convening so that we're not starting from zero. So using that information to create a straw model to see if we can create something new that will serve, like I said, the needs of everyone, that's been missing up to this point. So that's where we are. So we've made a lot of progress, and I'm really excited about, where we are now and where we're going.
I just so I just want to emphasize.
Thomas, yes, has been part of those conversations.
I just want to emphasize how important it is for each of us to make sure that everyone that we know knows about these convening gatherings. We really need to we don't want to be leaving people out. So it's kind of just going to have to be up to most of us and who we know and who they know, and just to get the word out so that everybody is aware that this is happening. And if they can't go, there's ways they can contribute. We just want to make this as open and inclusive and really emphasize the inclusive part as much as possible. So we just want to make sure everybody, and Blue put in the, and there Amanda put in the form there too. So
okay,
yeah, if you could just make sure you pass this information out to everybody that you can think of, like from now until the end of time, that would be great. That would be really great, because we really do want, the whole point is to hear from different voices. So thanks.
Yeah, and along with that, I just want to ensure that the Spanish-speaking artist community is included in that. I always advocate for language access. We have many new artists arriving from Puerto Rico. I just met 2 this weekend that do not speak English. So I'm actually pairing them with English, Spanish, Latino artists locally so that they can have that integration, and then connecting them to ROCO and the Artist Collaborative here on East Main Street. So that's just another way to ensure that radio will happily do a free PSA. Amanda, whoever's in charge of that, making sure that we are actually reaching out. And even beyond the city, there are many Latinx Spanish-speaking artists in our suburban districts that are part of Monroe County. So I just want to ensure language access is there and that there can be a Spanish interpreter at every one of those community gatherings. Thank you.
I wanted to,
just-
oh, go ahead, sorry.
I just want to highlight on that point that I did connect Mona with Marlene Cortez to ensure the language access. And Marlene also referred Mona to the Center for Disability Rights to ensure ASL access as well.
And I wanted to give a shout out to Mona because she has done a tremendous amount of legwork in putting
Yes.
this together, making sure that there are accessible locations, like physically accessible locations, as well as making sure that the language is accessible both for people in the deaf community and for people in the Spanish speaking community. She's done so much work on this. So huge shout out to Mona Sagasolasani for all of the legwork on this. It was a lot. It was a lot of work, and she's done a really tremendous job.
Yeah, I echo what Amanda says. Mona has been a great partner in putting this together, really leading the charge. So kudos to her and Rock Arts for leading this.
That's very exciting. Thank you all for that. And especially want to thank Amanda and Blue and others with Rock Arts United for taking on this role, and to Annette and her colleagues at the Community Foundation for also playing a big role in moving this forward. So it's a long time coming and exciting to see what conversations we're going to have around this, and we're gonna make this happen. We gotta. This is a big void in our community right now, so this is great.
Yes, there is definitely a lot of momentum that we want to build on and leverage. And so we're hoping to have the second convening possibly in early December. So look out for that as well. And like I said, any input on any groups that should be part of that second larger convening, please reach out to me. Blue?
Just wanted to chime in and reiterate, these 3 sessions are coming right up. The first one is October 29th, and the second is November 8th, and the last is November 9th. And that form that Amanda and I just linked in the chat, that is both an opportunity to provide input, but also RSVP for one of those sessions, which are live and in person at, the first one's at Writers and Books, the second is at Hochstein, and the third is at Roco. And again, kudos to Mona for chairing this whole effort and leading Rock Arts United into this role.
Great.
And I know on Thomas's encouragement that Mona is also looking to try and do something with Rena at Black Box to have that network represented as well. So
That's great. And that reminds me too, I want to make sure that we get this information up on the Arts Initiatives page that we have on the City of Rochester page. Is there, we certainly can publish the dates to help get the word out and maybe even do some social media around that, but is there like a brief narrative, brief write-up that describes what these meetings are about that we could use for that?
There is a flyer. Yeah, let me forward you the flyer right now so you can share that.
Perfect. Yeah, and if you want to just send it around to this whole group as well.
Yep.
Or if you don't have all the addresses, you can just send it to me and I can distribute it either way.
Okay.
Cool. Thanks. Next, we want to talk about funding for future years. Any other last comments or questions about the other topics we've talked about? Okay, cool. Heather, do you mind giving me permission to share screen here?
You should be able to, yeah. Let me know if you have
sorry.
trouble.
No, you're right. Sorry.
I'm on it.
Okay. So you are, for sure. So we want to talk about just the recap of the funding from past years and then look at future years, because we've got some new information, which I think is going to be exciting. But before I got a slide deck that sort of lays it all out visually so you can understand how it all works. But before I get into it, just a reminder about the process that was agreed upon here and with the administration in terms of how these decisions would be made, that we have the AC3 that is serving as an advisory group to the City Arts team, and the City Arts team is folks from multiple departments. And then ultimately that City Arts team would make that decision and recommendation to the mayor about, one, what the split might be between operating and capital expenses, and two, any ideas, any programs or specific projects that we have that we would like to propose to be, that we would use the percent for the arts money to do those things. That's this AC3 group is that advisory board, and then the City Arts team ultimately kind of makes that final recommendation. So that's just kind of a reminder of how this is meant to work. We recognize that this is not a perfect system, nor is it a system that's completely spelled out in legislation per se. But we think that it's wise to be working towards some sort of a formal arts commission, different than the Arts Council or Arts Alliance, an arts commission that would be that body that would ultimately make those decisions and continue to work with you all as community members and stakeholders in the arts community. But we would love to see the city establish some sort of an arts commission to kind of carry this forward. But this is sort of the process in the interim. Okay, so enough caveats by me. Let's take a look at some slides on this. Give me 1 second to set my screen up. So this is kind of our funding outlook as of this month, but also recapping past years. All right, so can everybody see these slides all right? Okay, so remember, as you recall, with the city, when it comes to finances, we work in fiscal years. So that's July 1st to June 30th every year. So fiscal year 21-22 ended this past June. But when it comes to capital funds, these funds can roll over year to year. And, you don't want to like drag them out for 10 years or anything like that, but we're not under an extreme time crunch to spend them in the year. So the money we're working with now on these public art programs are actually from last fiscal year, and that's okay, that we're going to be spending them over the course of the next fiscal year. Keep in mind, though, operating funds, which we just got the amendment to the policy to use operating funds in future years, those expire at the end of the fiscal year. So there is a bit more of a time crunch to have a plan up front and to execute it and spend those monies by the end of the fiscal year, or we lose those dollars. So just keep that in mind when we're talking about the split between capital and operating. So to recap, what we all decided that this past fiscal year, $100,000 for the mural program, $100,000 for public art installation program or the non-mural program, and $36,000 to start putting together money for an arts and culture plan. And of course, as you know, those two pairs of $100,000 are to find an arts or an organization to administer those funds, with roughly 20,000 or so going towards the organization and the remaining 80 in each of those buckets going towards the actual artist that created it. When it comes to the arts and culture plan, we're thinking we probably need in the neighborhood of $150,000 to $200,000 total to do all the different things that we want to do, because it will be an elaborate plan, touch on lots of different things. We've got a start on 36 towards that. We need an additional, say, 114, 164-ish in future years. So that's what makes up 21-22. The fiscal year that we are in now, as you'll recall, was we basically decided to do the same amount, but future years it'll be more close. It'll be tied to that 1% calculation. But we have another 236 to work with in 2022 and 23, and again, that's capital only for now, because that was established before the amendment to the arts policy. So here's the exciting news. For next fiscal year, starting next July, pending the adoption of the budget in the spring, and the money would not be available until July of next year, the 1% calculation yielded an even higher number this time around, $271,000. We think these are going to be kind of on the high end for years to come because we happen to be working on a lot of big infrastructure projects right now, especially through Rockland Riverway. But those will continue. We've got big projects happening with the Inner Loop, High Falls State Park eventually, so we're going to continue to do some big projects, but I do wonder if maybe these are a little bit on the high end and future years might be a little bit lower. So just to set reasonable expectations there. But the good news is we've got 236 we haven't spent, and it appears to be in the neighborhood of $270,000 for next year that we can talk about how we might spend that money on public art. Actually, I have an asterisk here. This assumes council adopts the amendment. I can get rid of that because they did adopt it. But in any case, so we have a unique, really cool opportunity here that I don't know if this is going to happen again, just the way the stars align, because we're in the midst of jumpstarting this process. And it's been slow, as you all know. So thank you for your patience. But because of the pace and because this is kind of new, we're ending up with 2 additional years here that are overlapping. And so we can look at looking at this pot of money together, these 2 years together, and how might we spend around $500,000 over the next couple of years. Future years, it'll be just looking at 1 year at a time, and it'll be a smaller amount, but it's kind of a unique opportunity this year. So any questions on how these numbers work and how we got to these numbers before we get into what we might spend them on? Go ahead, Thomas.
So I just have a question. The arts and cultural plan, will all of that 150 to 200K come from this fund, or will there be additional funds from somewhere else that'll be put into the plan part?
So hypothetically, yeah, there's a couple different ways that could play out. We could technically use exclusively percent for the arts funds to get to that number. We are hopeful that the county will contribute, which will lower the amount that we would have to take out of the percent for the arts bucket. And then I suppose there's a chance we could find a grant or other contributions. As you know, we have been talking with Annette and RICF about potential contribution. And to this point, Annette has said, well, we need to have a better understanding of what the actual number is so they can have a discussion about what they might contribute. There is a scenario there for Annette and others where the community foundation's participation, whatever the amount they contribute or don't contribute, whether it might be just in kind or money or both, there is a scenario where their participation is kind of parallel to what we do, so that their money doesn't necessarily contribute to the consultant, but they could, in theory, spend money on additional community engagement. For example, paying a stipend to committee members or paying a stipend to community liaisons to do some outreach. Quite honestly, that money would better come from the community foundation than it would from the city, because there's so much bureaucracy with city money and strings attached. And everything's got to be open and fair and competitive when we put out money. That really complicates the process of doing stipends. Whereas the community foundation or other organizations like that don't have the strings attached that we do, and they could be more efficient and effective at doing something like that. So I'm just going to throw that out there as a scenario to consider, but we can certainly circle back offline in that to talk about possibilities there.
Yeah, sorry, Annette, go ahead.
No, I just say initially hearing this for the first time, I think that that our grant committee would be receptive to that kind of proposal.
I bring that up because I think it might be a great idea if even now we create a sort of subcommittee to kind of help think through the arts and cultural plan and how we set up primarily the funding of it. But just to have a sort of, conversation with some committee that kind of focuses on that, just as we're doing with the other 2 things. So I think it's a good idea.
And to build on that, I just want to mention, Blue had asked me about the creative economy study. We're going to be talking to the researchers next week, so I'll have more of an update on that process. But my thinking is that information also will help inform the arts and cultural plan. So we can think that through as well.
Kevin,
Yeah.
I have a quick question. So if we end up getting county money involved, does that mean we would look at a larger area for the arts and culture plan if it's, as opposed to if it's just city money or city focused? You know, would that change the geographic area?
Yeah, it would. And I think, I mean, even if the county didn't contribute any money, I'm almost certain, and I can't speak for them, but I'm almost certain that they would participate on a committee or something like that and bring that perspective. So even if it was just city money, I think it would be difficult to ignore the suburban towns as they relate to the arts and culture ecosystem, but certainly have a strong focus on the city. But if then taking it to the next level, if the county did contribute money, then we definitely would have that component. But that's a blurry line, I guess. And we're open to sort of continuing that conversation. How, practically speaking, what does that mean to have a strong focus on the city, but consider the rest of the county as well? That's just a concept, right? But practically speaking, what does that mean? So
It just seems like you could end up with a really different product or process if you're looking at a much bigger area. So that's what I just wasn't sure if that had been discussed previously or not.
So that's
yeah.
oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Thomas.
Well, I was just gonna say, that's kind of why I'm bringing up this idea of the committee, that because I think these are little questions here that we need to bring up. And what are those questions? Maybe we, can't answer them in the committee, but we need to be bringing up these particular questions, for there may be a scenario where the city funds something that relates to the city part of this study, and then the county, funds something that relates to the county part, whatever, I don't know. But anyway, those questions though, that Ellen's bringing up, there's going to be other questions. And so I think if there's a committee to kind of work hand in hand, maybe with the city, a subcommittee of this group, I think that would be a really good idea.
Yeah, and if you look right now, currently the county funds art organizations all located in the city. So that would be a great place for us to enhance and deepen that partnership and collaboration with the county. And when Thomas, Sean, and I met with Executive Bello, they have a learning curve. They did not even know the term creative economy. So at that time, they really were so new to the game. So I think we, the city, and this AC3 has to lead by example so that the county then can piggyback on our successes and the foundation that we're laying down. Thomas, I do believe that we are divided into two subcommittees, and one of our subcommittees of the AC3 is to focus on that master plan. So perhaps we need to reactivate that subcommittee and let them take it on. So I think that's some really exciting news today. And really, this is the reactivation of this committee to be actively involved and starting to really put forth this plan as it evolves and transforms. Thank you.
Yeah, well said, Annette. So yeah, we got to have some further conversations about that, and I think we could talk about that in a future. We call it the CCEP subcommittee, the Creative Community Empowerment Plan subcommittee. So we could talk about that. But I think bottom line, Thomas, to your original question, this pot of money through Percent for the Arts is far and away the best opportunity to fund this plan. And if we can't cover the expenses for the plan through this, and hopefully the county's participation, it's going to be pretty challenging to look elsewhere to find the money for that. So this is definitely our best opportunity. Okay, so let's look at how we might consider spending that money. And we don't have to make absolute concrete decisions today. This is kind of an initial conversation to take the temperature and see what folks think. Sean, go ahead.
I got a quick question, Kevin. Is there a way that, as you mentioned other organizations, is there a way that something like the, I always forget what they're called, Greater Health Foundation might be able to support such initiative, because arts is a health and healing initiative that touches on many points. And it might be a way to look at how do we heal from certain traumas, or how do we grow as a community in a health way through the arts. I'm just pitching that out there as some way where that might be another way to actually support this on a larger level through a series of funding I think they fund, a couple of, like 3 years in a row or something. I can't remember how that works, but it might be something they could support. Just tossing that out there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great idea, Sean. And I think it's an example of any number of foundations or nonprofits in the community that would consider funding this because they would see how arts and culture aligns with their goals. So I think that would be a matter of this group and maybe the CSEP subcommittee brainstorming a list of organizations like that, and then identifying who's going to do the research. And okay, let's talk to the Health Foundation and see what sort of grant funding programs they have. I bet Annette is familiar with most of these, and could give us some advice on that. And then figure out, okay, do we want to make a pitch or apply to them? Does their application timing align with what our needs are? But I think it's worth looking into those to see what might actually work and cover some of that funding.
Can I ask this is Sarah Scott. Can I just ask a point of clarification regarding the county and county involvement?
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking about including them in the planning, but we're not talking about any of our 1% money being used to do installations in the county, correct? I mean, the city of Rochester is obviously in the county of Monroe, but we're focusing that money in city neighborhoods, correct? We're not looking to do a plan that also then includes putting sculptures in neighboring suburbs, correct?
Yeah, that's a great clarification.
Okay. So want to clarify that.
The money spent on any public art can only be used in the city and on city property, even more.
And we would be prioritizing city residents, artists that are city residents, to get that funding to do city-focused art, correct?
Exactly. Yeah, and in that
just
sense,
want to make sure I was understanding the conversation. Okay, thank you.
Sure. No, I'm glad you mentioned that. And in that sense, this work, it's a little bit confusing as well. It's almost like there's going to be a plan within a plan here. There's a broader plan that's about arts and culture ecosystem. How are things going in Rochester? Who do we want to become? How do we get there? And that sort of broader discussion about making investments and improving that sort of ecosystem is a little bit more of a regional discussion with a focus on the city. The plan within a plan is that, and part of the reason why this project costs so much, or costs what it does, it's cheaper than other plans, but is that a subset of this would be a public art master plan. And that is a more specific plan for the city itself about to give direction for future investments in creating public art. Where are the specific location opportunities? What types of public art do we want to do? How do we want to work with artists, that sort of thing. That master plan will be a subset or a chapter, if you will, of the broader plan. And that plan, that chapter, if you will be a really important tool for this group to help us make future decisions about how to spend that money. But any money spent on actual public art would have to be in the city. And then the county could do the same. They could do a parallel kind of investment program to invest in public art outside of the city or in the city if they want. Okay, so let's look at the options that we've considered. We had an initial conversation with the city arts team about this to consider some options for how to spend the money. And again, we don't need to make absolute decisions today, but let's just kind of brainstorm this, and there might be some other things to add to this list to consider. But you see this, we're talking about the current fiscal year amount and next, sorry, my computer wants to start on me. No, not now. And next fiscal year's amount totaling around $500,000, with a caveat that is contingent on the budget being adopted and the money wouldn't be available until next July for the second half of that. So first option would be to contribute the additional funds needed for the arts and culture plan. And I just repeated that amount here in the neighborhood of $164,000 to go with the 36. And as noted, that might be less if the county contributes or if we found other sources. So that's one option. And even if we did the whole shebang there's still quite a bit of money left in the Present for the Arts program here. Another option is to basically repeat what we just did or about to launch, and that's do a mural program and a non-mural program and find organizations to administer those. We could do that again if we wanted to. And it might be a different amount next year, but we could do the same content. The third option is to do similar to what we are about to launch with those two programs, but maybe get more specific about what we want to do with them. So same idea of finding an organization to administer the funds, but maybe we as a group want to come up with like a predefined theme, or maybe we want to come up with a predefined location, like a certain neighborhood or along the river or whatever we want to talk about. Or it's a predefined type of city property, like maybe we want to do a program that's all in parks, or it's all at rec centers, or it's all at schools, something like that. And we don't need to like talk at length today about those possibilities. This is just kind of all under the bucket of number 3 of what we could potentially do. Or maybe we want to do a program that's focused on a specific type of public art, for example, playful interaction installations. We want to do a whole bunch of those, and that's the focus of the RFP, and we'll find an organization to administer those. So the third option is to do what we're doing now, just be more specific about what we're trying to do. Does that make sense? Fourth option is to do something fairly different, which is just 1 or 2 large projects somewhere in the city on city property. And then if it's only a couple of projects, then we might want to consider managing those in-house. We may not need to spend any money on a different organization to administer those funds. We can figure that out later. But that's another option, is just to go bigger, since this will be a rare opportunity to have this much money in 1 year. The fifth option, this is the one that enables the use of the operating funds. And again, we don't have to choose just one of these. We can choose a combination of these. But this one would be like operating expense grants for artists and arts organizations. This is similar to what the county's doing now, but we have an additional layer of requirement that we would have to do for our program, and that is that whatever those groups do, they must demonstrate how they're going to provide a public benefit. So, for example, we could give money to a dance troupe just for their operating expenses, right? Their normal budget, as opposed to creating a unique performance. We could give it just for their operating expenses, but they would have to demonstrate how it's going to have a public benefit. For example, we're going to set aside X number of tickets for our performances to be free to the general public, or for free to folks from certain neighborhoods, or however we want to sort of define that, so that there's more equitable access to that public art. So that's another option that is enabled by the amendment to the policy for successful work. The sixth one, setting aside money for maintenance. That doesn't necessarily mean spending the money in these next couple of years, but we would be setting aside into a pot of money that we'd want to protect, so that we have access to that money when it's time to do some repairs or maintenance. We think this is a really wise use of this money, especially since we're going to be creating a lot of public art through this program. We need to figure out how to pay for maintenance of it. And talking to the folks in Buffalo, that was one of their biggest pieces of advice to us, was that you got to find a way to set aside money for maintenance of these things. Again, that's not going to be all $500,000, and we don't have to decide today what that amount is. Just sort of a general consensus about, do we think it's a good idea to set money for that? And then lastly, and then we can get into a conversation here. This was kind of an interesting one that actually just popped up. The city was approached with a proposal to purchase the Frederick Douglass statues that are all over the city. So this is a very specific option that has come before us. I'm sure you're all familiar with those statues. I believe Olivia Kim was the sculptress for those, right? Yeah, and Sean, did you have involvement with those as well? Anybody else here have involvement with that program of getting those sculptures around town? No? Okay, not a big deal, just curious. So anyways, Rochester Community Television, I guess it was, sent a letter to the city and said, these are made of fiberglass. They're not meant to be outside long-term. They're really amazing pieces, and we would like to see if the city is interested in purchasing them, so that the city can find indoor locations for them throughout the city, whether it be schools, rec centers, or city hall, or what have you. We don't have to make decisions about where, but we as a group would like to entertain the use of some of that $500,000 to purchase those statues and preserve them, and find locations for them. It's not a big ticket item. I don't know the amount, but if I had to guess, it's in the neighborhood of $50,000 or less. So it's not going to drain this $500,000 very much. Just something to consider. Don't quote me on that number, but just kind of order of magnitude, give you an idea of what we're looking at for that. Yeah, so that's what we came up with as a group, as some ideas. So now let's just open it up to get people's thoughts on these, and also if there are other ideas on this list that we should entertain.
So I'm
any
going to jump
questions about this?
right in. Oh, Thomas?
No, go ahead,
Yes,
Annette.
if there's any
Thank you.
questions. Yeah.
No questions, but one of the key things I am looking at is really how can we impact violence in our city through arts funding. So I'm really loving the idea of a combination of different elements of this list. And number 3 being around a theme of peace, collaboration, community. Even our art is siloed. Even in the city, especially in the city, it's siloed. So how do we break down some of these barriers, create a welcoming city, especially with all the violence? I just had a group of kids identify our mayor in a picture, and the reason they knew him is because they've seen him on TV talking about the violence in our city. So for 17 and 18-year-old high school students, that's a big deal. That means that they're only getting messaging around the violence. And how do we utilize art in a way that really brings around a positive messaging? Also, the other piece is I love the idea of the Frederick Douglass art pieces being purchased, but I want to have a clearer picture around what that might look like and what is the maintenance of them once they're indoors, because they're still fiberglass. So are we talking a 10-year lifespan, a 15-year lifespan? And some of them have been more exposed than others. So I'd be curious to hear about those elements as well. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Annette.
So I think this is a great list. It's wonderful, very well thought out. I'm going to just talk, I think, about piggybacking on what Annette just said. I agree with her that I think a theme thing, especially at a time like this, is not a bad idea, actually. The other thing, though, I want to talk about is I think it's really important that the operating expense grants for arts and arts organization remains somewhat in our preview. I think that this is about cultivating and nurturing, and so we need to really have that in our, in our minds about how do we help that? How do we continue to create a city of the arts? So I think that's very important. And then the purchase about the relocation of Frederick Douglass, I think that actually should be funds that are, gotten together by raising through private funds. I really, and then given to the city. I just don't think that this fund is really about that. And I think that's easy, and not easy, but that's doable actually, to raise private funds to purchase those Frederick Douglass statues and then donate them to wherever, to the city or whatever. But that's maybe a bigger discussion. But I just don't feel that this money really should be going to that specific project. And then on the setting aside for maintenance, so this is also a really big issue, and something we're going to have to talk about pretty soon are the sculptures and all the outdoor stuff that is on University Avenue that belongs to Art Walk at the moment. Art Walk's been trying to give it to the city for quite a few years now, and eventually someone's going to have to take ownership of that work that's outside. The sculptures, the bus shelters, everything, the benches. And so that's going to have to be a discussion pretty soon down the road. And so setting aside money for maintenance is really, 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 really important. And so I do think that those two things for me, the operating expense grants and the maintenance, are very urgent and important.
Thanks, Thomas. And I'm glad you mentioned the Art Walk pieces. That's a good addition to this list for us to consider, because it kind of almost falls into the maintenance category in some ways, because it's some of them need some help, but there is that question of long-term ownership. So it's, we'll add that to this list. Antonietta, did you have a question or a thought?
I have. If
Not
no.
so much a question, but more so a reminder. A lot of times when these wonderful opportunities are happening, there's the underestimation of budgeting for accessibility, right? So a lot of times it's like, oh yeah, crap, we didn't put that in the budget for a sign language interpreter. To make it cheaper, we can ask people from NTID, or they'll be free, or just having one interpreter do all the work. And it's just like, that's not okay, because these interpreters do have his job as a business, and businesses should be treated by such, right? So it's just kind of, I know it might be in the drop in the bucket for some of this, for this amount of money, but just something to consider. I'm not sure which topic we could put it under, but budgeting for interpreter, especially if we have a deafblind person and we need a tactile interpreter that also into that. So it's just kind of like keeping that in the back of your head. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a great point. So the example that comes to mind, if I'm understanding you right, is that if we were to put some money towards grants for arts organizations and they were to do certain performances, that would be perhaps a requirement that they budget for interpreters for those performances.
100%.
Okay, great. Thank you for mentioning that. Amanda, you had a thought?
You're welcome. Absolutely.
I do have a thought. Looking at point number 3, I really strongly want to caution this group against moving into any type of role or position where curatorial decisions will be made. I want to make sure that we're letting the creative community in Rochester decide what the greatest needs are for themselves and for their communities and the people who participate with them, instead of having us dictate that. And I think on the third point, you know, saying that we want interactive art is one thing, but saying like, we're specifically looking for this and this and this, like, I really want to caution us against narrowing down too far, especially when we're just getting started out and we don't even know all of the creative ideas that are out there. I think we want to be really, really careful about us making any kind of too many or too big of any kind of decision that could restrict what's produced and therefore kind of be arbitrarily determining what's wanted by a community without asking them first.
Okay. Yeah, good point. Thank you.
Yeah, we did a survey on Scranton and El Camino neighborhood around the mural projects, and we were very specific with listening to the community. They were very clear about what kind of mural art they wanted on their walls and what they didn't want on their walls. So I think that's going to be part of our community outreach and surveys. Creating interactive art can mean anything to any artist. So then it boils down to the neighborhoods and the artists living and working in those neighborhoods to create that. So for me, I'm looking at the steps in the process and it not being this arbitrary, oh, we're going to do this in this neighborhood, but really empower the neighborhoods and the artists that live in them to look within their neighborhoods as to what art they want in those communities that best serve the neighborhoods that they will live and thrive.
Which does happen a lot in many cities across the country. It's, you know, when you're being called, when you put the call out, you're being commissioned to do the piece. in most cases, they've already connected and met with those neighborhoods and communities where this piece is going to go. And so they do have an overarching theme or an idea there. So you're kind of actually, you know, applying yourself to what the communities are looking for. And that tends to work out a lot. I do that myself. So
It sounds like the third point on this list might be more effective after we have a arts and creative plan completed, and we have an assessment on who needs what where.
Yeah, it certainly could contribute to that. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to share that. I think investing something in the plan is pretty important, because we'll struggle with these conversations if we don't have a good focused direction. So I think some investment, but it would be also great if the county would invest in that as well.
Chris, I was gonna second that. I think this team has done a good job so far, but as we see, like, the money is going to continue to come in now that we've prioritized. And so prioritizing a plan as soon as possible so that we have a document that we're working from. And I think if this group can agree to allow some of that funding from the city side, that can be used to leverage in conversation with the county to say, hey, the city's putting this money out there. Because this plan is going to take time. We want to do a lot of community input. We want to identify the right kind of company to lead the plan. So it's going to take time from the time we get that money, go to council, allocate it, get the county on board. I would say getting that started as soon as possible is a huge priority. And honestly, I'll just say from my perspective, working with the city, wanting to do other plans like a parks master plan, having access to money now to do an arts plan is huge. It's not often that you have the ability to throw $160,000, $200,000 at a plan. And I think rather than try to go around to different groups and try to ask them for piecemeal here, piecemeal there, let's just do it. This is kind of like a once in a career, or once in a, not, I don't want to say lifetime, but this is a huge opportunity for our city, I think.
Thanks, Sarah. Is everyone else comfortable with using this money to sort of, knowing that we don't know the exact number now, but to fill out that remaining need to develop the plan, keeping in mind that we hope that the county contribution will reduce that amount?
I want to jump in with a little bit of contrarianness, which is my tendency sometimes. I do hear a number of other suggestions as to where the arts and culture master plan funding can come from. But I certainly know that funding individual artists and small organizations, the sources that were just mentioned are not necessarily, fungible sources where that funding could be applied and transferred to individual artists or small organizations. So I guess what I'm saying is, if there are other sources for a plan, shouldn't we explore those and pursue those first? Because, well, anyway, I'm advocating for our attention to our core mission here, which is supporting artists and small orgs to a large degree. I understand that some of that may be going toward a plan.
Yeah, there's definitely overlap there, but I mean, I think that there's a balance here, because if there are, to Sean's suggestion, some opportunities out there that we could quickly look into, it's probably worth looking into them. But I think to Sarah's point, we could honestly drag that out for years chasing money, and we have the money right here. And this plan is going to impact so many things in terms of how we invest in the future and how we hear from the community and that sort of thing, that it does make some sense to do it as soon as you can.
But are you, just to question that real quickly, are you suggesting that the plan that needs to move forward post haste is the plan that will govern our operations for public art, or the broader, including the county master plan project? Which one?
It would be both, and the master plan would be a subset of the broader community plan. But there's a need for both of those as soon as we can.
Yeah, I know we've had huge discussions about paying a consultant to come in from out of our city. We've had this conversation for over a year. And one of the things I think is really critical in the discussions that we've had with the AC3, Thomas, myself, and Sean, and Kelly, and Kevin, is that this consultant actually is going to work for us and not the other way around. In the past, that has really looked quite different. And we felt very, very much like you can't hire an outside consultant to come in if they don't know the demographics in the community that they're going to create a vision plan for. So that's the reality. So instead of it being reversed where we're feeding them information and they're telling us, the relationship with this consultant would be that we, this subcommittee of the AC3, would really be leading that consultant to write. And we've asked this question of everyone in this group. If you feel you are qualified to do that job, please let us know, because internally, many of us can do certain sections of it. But really, to have a viable, functioning master plan, you really need that level of expertise. So at least that was my understanding. That was the discussions we've had. Sean, Thomas chime in around this issue, because this plan is essential to know where we're going to go with these funds and this vision. So just wanted to add that in, because this has been a conversation we've had for over a year. Thank you.
Wanted to just also comment on a couple other points on here. I wanted to back up Kevin on that mention of the need for maintenance, especially as this is an extraordinarily sound. I mean, as we're looking toward the future, you know, you who are the closest to the numbers are saying this is an extraordinary year, and it's a double year, right? So it's sort of, you know, this is a unique windfall, as it were. So setting aside money for maintenance was a clear, absolutely clear recommendation from Buffalo. And we actually just had an event at ROCO yesterday, on Saturday. And the need for maintaining our public art came up twice, even though that was not the topic of the talk. So this is definitely in the air. I've heard a lot of conversation about the works down on University and in the art walk area. So anyway, it does seem prudent to be setting aside some substantial amount of this double funding for future needs. And actually, they're actually existing needs for maintenance, really. That's what we're saying. They're already existing.
Thanks, Blue.
Yeah.
Sounds like there's pretty strong support for that. Any other thoughts on the opportunity with the Douglas statues?
I'm inclined to agree with Thomas.
That we might be able to find funds elsewhere to do that. Is that what you mean, Amanda?
Absolutely. Yes, that is what I mean.
Okay.
I agree with Amanda and Thomas on that one as well.
Okay. I want to make note of all these things here as we're getting some good comments.
And I just want to echo what a couple of people have said about the operating expenses as a priority as well. That's something that we heard in the workshops that the foundation hosted with the Buffalo Foundation regarding a new arts grant program they were creating. That came up top as a need over and over. So
Great, good to know. Okay. Yeah, I'm just trying to monitor the chat here as well, and looks like there's a lot of agreement with these statements. That's good. So I think we're going in a good direction here with some consensus. But let me back up a little bit and ask, what are some initial thoughts about what a split might be if we were to do a mix of operating and capital programs here? whether it's a specific amount, like we say, hey, let's put 100 towards number 5, or it's 60-40, or, you know, just what are your general thoughts about what that split might be? And actually, before we do that, I just want to check with Heather, because she's been in discussions with our budget office about this, and make sure that I'm characterizing this the right way in terms of what our prospects might be, and also any thoughts on timing of a decision about that split.
Yeah, the budget folks said they would like a decision on that split by next month.
Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead, Amanda.
So I'm wondering, when you're saying capital expenses versus operating expenses, as an art administrator, when I hear operating expenses, I hear like that's money that I can put towards my staff. It's money that I can put towards keeping the lights on. Are we talking about that portion of arts budgets, or are we talking about non-permanent art projects? Is this for a temporary thing? Is this for a one-time thing? Is this for performance, education, and that kind of thing? Or is it truly an operating expense, like this will help keep the lights on, this will help keep payroll met?
So we're, this is a relatively new understanding that we could actually use it for what you're talking about, just truly operating expenses. Our understanding, we're still developing this understanding, right? But our understanding is that as long as we get a public benefit from that, we could offer it as just operating expense grants. And by public benefit, examples that we have precedent for are things like when there's a performance at the site, 20 seats are offered for free through the local art centers or something like that. And we're still kind of developing that idea, but we're excited by the potential for the operating expense grants, because we understand it's a lot more nimble than tying it to a specific performance or arts education class, et cetera.
But in future years, because this, we have to keep this in mind for this whole discussion, is this is just 1 year, actually 2 years. But the intention here is this is a permanent program, and every year we're going to have these discussions and make these kinds of decisions, so that I think in future years, as we get our feet under us a bit more, we could entertain those a little bit more of a complicated arrangement, like a specific class being developed or a specific project being commissioned that's non-capital in nature. Whereas here, this number 5 is really more about the operating expenses that you mentioned, Amanda.
Okay. One of the things that's coming to mind for me is when I was still working at a nonprofit organization and there was a need for an interpreter. There was always a hard scramble to find funding. And is this the kind of thing that we could have a really short turnaround on, where if a nonprofit arts organization recognizes that they need an interpreter, they don't have an interpreter on their staff, they could tap the city, get this funding right away, because, you know, classes next month and they need an interpreter next month. Is this something that will be that nimble? Or are we thinking more like, okay, it's the beginning of the year, so let's think about all of the projects that you're going to do for the year and then apply for funding for all of those things?
Amanda, let me just chime in here. As you may have encountered before, not too much with the city is right away. So I think it's really going to have to be what the sort of the latter that you said, that there would be a grant, sort of a non-specific grant made to an organization, and we wouldn't say what that money could be used for specifically. We wouldn't designate it for one thing or another. It would be a grant to an organization, and then there would be a requirement that they provide public services that, you know, this benefit that Kevin mentioned, but we probably would not specify how it had to be spent. But getting money for a specific thing in a short period of time is probably not going to work.
Yeah, the nimbleness isn't in
The nimbleness is
that,
not. how we do it.
but the nimbleness is in, it's a grant, and so potentially an organization could use it for whatever they want. They don't have to report that. They don't have to, it's not like a line item budget that we're monitoring. It's just a grant for just generally operating expenses, whatever's needed for that organization.
Yeah.
I want to,
So can I ask a point of clarification from the city side of that? So there would be some kind of RFP issued and then groups would submit and then there would be a review committee to review. So it wouldn't necessarily be the same organization each year getting money from the city. It could be a combination of different organizations each year.
Yeah, we could
Right.
decide that. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, we would be tasked, both the AC3 and the CAT working together, we would be tasked with developing a whole new program. And that program would include developing an RFP, what are our goals for the program? It would, we'd have to decide, what are the funding amounts? Are these $5,000 grants? Are they $10,000 grant? Whatever. We would have to talk about that. And then I think that the good side here, or the upside, is that there is that nimbleness that we're talking about, because you're not specifying what the money should be used for. The tricky part of it is in that review process, reviewing proposals from organizations that say, we would like that $10,000 to go toward, this is what we do, and this is what we create, and this is how we work in the community. But they would also have to propose what their public benefit is going to be. So the tricky part would be like, how do you evaluate those against what other people propose? It's going to be a softer kind of gut feel kind of review process compared to like, do you meet these criteria? So as a team, we would have to kind of work on developing a program that makes sense, where there's some sort of rationale to evaluating the public benefit that these organizations propose. So that's going to take some thought, but it could be a really cool program.
So could I just propose that we do number 2, which is kind of basically what we did this time around, and just add number 5 and number 6. So there wouldn't be as much money in number 2, but we would add number 5 and number 6 as our, so 2, 5, and 6, I think are really, from my perspective, the priorities at the moment. So that's just my 2 cents.
Thomas, I think, yeah, maybe we can circle back to maintenance for a moment. I think Blue had put in the chat, I suggest 200,000 for maintenance. And I think I think we should kind of dig into that a little bit, just because I think on the city side, we've been operating with the idea that maybe we don't want to necessarily, I think if burden is the right word, burden this program with maintenance of all public art.
Right.
So we were thinking, okay, well, this should be at very least a robust maintenance budget for art created through Percent for the Arts through this program. But if you are all open to thinking about maintenance of public art created through other funding sources, we're open to that discussion. But I think let's open, thoughts on that?
Oh, sorry, Blue, go ahead.
I totally understand, Heather, that is such a bad a can of worms to open, but I also understand that there's never been a budget for maintaining public art. And I think there is quite a need. In fact, there's a sculpture right around the corner from Rocco that is city owned that has never been power washed. And it's pretty notable artwork in town. And made by a pretty notable artist who passed away recently. Anyway, I won't get into it, but it's just one example. There are artworks owned by the city already that are not being maintained. I understand exactly what you're cautioning against, which is why I am advocating for a higher percentage, essentially almost one full year of this budget, 200K, because I just think, the cost of, let's say a sculpture needs, I don't know, let's say it's a metal sculpture and it's got a bunch of chipped paint from salt or whatever, like matching the paint, finding the right people to do that, that's easily going to add up to pretty significant numbers pretty quickly. And I know that's looking at past works, but I also think that, maintaining a new mural that's created through this program could easily be, 5 or 10K per project down the road. So I just feel like it could add up quickly, either path for older existing sculptures and murals and new ones created out of our current year. So that's why I'm advocating for a higher number set aside.
I would,
Just a quick, sorry.
Go ahead, Sean.
I was just going to say, are these maintenance agreements already put into your RFPs? Have they been put in there to state, X, Y, and Z dollars will be paid to artists to maintain or whatever for time period, and it increases through time because we know the cost of materials, whatever else? Is that actually put into the city's RFPs when they put this call out? These future calls to come.
Well, can I answer speaking to previous calls? And then, because I think this provides some context, and again, I hate to be the person that's harping on this plan, but I think there's just been a really discombobulated process in the past because we don't have a solid arts plan. So every public art call in my experience in the last 10 years, and then just historically working with DRIS and DES on, and I wouldn't even call it maintenance, to be honest, because we don't have, there isn't a good maintenance plan. I think there's been disparate agreements, different ways that this has gone. And so maintenance or the placement of different types of art in different places hasn't always been thoroughly thought through with any sort of coherent through line through every single process. And so in some cases we have money and we have an idea of how to connect with those artists or with the curator to maintain the spaces. Like when the skate park murals got vandalized, we were able to mobilize, at least for most of them, to get money and do that, but it wasn't easy. I think Art Walk has been one of those projects that's been out there for a long time. I think that going forward, I believe in the RFP we issued, we did say that there needs to be some kind of thought given to maintenance and there needs to be a solid plan because it is an issue that comes up a lot. But I would just go back, and I know it didn't make the cut, but an arts plan that lays this out very clearly, I think is essential as we go forward. Otherwise, we're going to be continuing to have these conversations. And I will tell you that within the city, there isn't really staff, and I'm not saying this in any way insulting, that have the skill or knowledge on how to maintain these art pieces correctly. And there's definitely not money within the budgets. And so to have money set aside and have a connection to the arts community and the artists who made these pieces to help the city maintain them properly is going to be essential to make this a success.
Well, can I just say, Amanda, I'm sorry. You have your hand up?
No, sorry, I just forgot to put it down.
Oh, that's okay. Sorry. Sarah's right. I forgot to add number one. That's actually one of my priorities. So 1, 2, 5, and 6. But along with the plan, I feel very similar about the maintenance piece. It's not this committee or this money's responsibility, I don't think, to fully take on the plan for the arts for the entire city and also maintaining the artwork for the entire city or the city owns. I mean, yes, there's some money here, but I think there needs to be a bigger discussion here. I mean, the roads get taken maintenance. I mean, there has to be a bigger discussion here than just putting all the onus on this one pot of money for every little thing that was related to arts. I mean, I just don't think that that's fair, actually. So yes, we do have some money, and some money should be put towards the plan and some money should be put towards the maintenance, but all the money for maintenance and the plan should not come out of this one fund. I mean, I just don't feel that that's, just because we found this money now or whatever, that doesn't mean, this money should be supporting artists, actually. And then, yes, some of it can be for operating or maintenance or a plan for the city, but we need to, use what we can to find other ways of supplementing what is needed, not just using this money for everything. I mean, that's my feeling, and that's actually a strong feeling. But I really feel that for the future, we really can't pigeonhole the arts just in one place and just think that, okay, well, they're going to be taken care of by this, because that's not, the arts really are across the board. And the reason Art Walk worked is because we combined it with the health, we combined it with the road work, we combined it with education, and all those things put money into the pot. And I think we have to kind of do that again, or something like that. The other piece I'll say before I shut up is, what was it? Oh God, I just forgot. Okay, well, never mind. Oh, the other piece is the the taking care of the maintenance. So I agree that we do need to put money aside for maintenance, and that there needs to be, like Sean's saying, there needs to be written in how that's going to work at the beginning. So this group could put together some kind of, wording about that. But I do think that the way the Art Walk took care of all of those things, the maintenance for all of that stuff for like 10 years, and then we kind of ran out of money. But I do think that there are some plans that have been in place that did work actually. And so maybe to go back and look at some of the ways that some of that maintenance did work in the past might be good information for us. And then finally, sorry, I said there was a final thing. I think the county had a good plan about this idea of operating expenses for arts. And we might take a look at how they addressed that issue. And some of the other arts councils also have done the same idea. So I think that we don't have to recreate the whole wheel about how to word this and how to go about it, because there are people who are already doing it. So those are just my things popping into my head.
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback right on that. I just looked at Chicago's mural program. It is actually written into their application process, maintenance. Also, murals are not meant to last forever. So there actually is a finite existence of their artwork. And let's not create something new. Let's just replicate the success of other mid-sized cities that are doing the same thing. They have over 50 murals they maintain in Chicago, in the Latinx community specifically. So I say we look at other mid-sized cities and what they do well and replicate it here.
As you mentioned that, and that Philadelphia does that as well, the Philadelphia Mural Arts Program, which has been around for years. And what they do is they actually do take percentage. They're actually at the city's table. So they get a percentage of money from their environmental services, their recreation. Every little bit chips in from different offices because it touches on those different points. If it's in the right of way, that's where DES is dealing with that. If it's inside of a recreation center, a library, the library's pitching in funds to maintain the work there. The recreation is taking care of funds to initiate there. They even put in they even have a health office, and so they pitch in funds to actually make things happen there, to make artwork happen and to help to maintain them. So they have, which in each one of the departments gives money to the program to help support it.
And this is the interpreter. Excuse me, I'm sorry, this is the interpreter speaking. I have 3 minutes and then I have to go to my other assignment, so I just want to warn you all.
Thank you, Anya. I want to, Chris has been waiting patiently with his hand up, so I want to make sure Chris gets his comment in.
I'll just be really quick, knowing that we have time run out. One, I just want to say, I think it's important that we do find operating support for artists and especially smaller arts organizations, and that process be simple and not a big drawn out piece. So I think we need to think about that. And I also think it's important that we think about what's significant for those artists and organizations, rather than giving out a ton of really teeny grants, that we really support them substantially.
Thanks, Chris. And I just want to mention a couple things about what Thomas had said. One, you're right that the county's got that program, and actually BJ Scanlon from the county has provided me with some materials that we can look at to see, to not recreate the wheel there. So I think there's some possibilities there. But I do want to address the idea of finding money from other programs for the plan or maintenance. Like, I hear what you're saying. I just don't know where that money's coming from. This is the money that we have for the arts right now. And if we have better infrastructure up and running in future years and more money dedicated to this, I think we can and try and focus more of this money on the artists themselves. But right now, this is where we have money available for that. That being said, if there are opportunities, again, like we mentioned earlier, with other organizations, like Sean mentioned, the Health Foundation, let's do that as soon as possible to see if they could contribute to this. But the other limitation we're working with is, and you forgive me if I'm sounding like making excuses here, but because in the absence of dedicated staff to this this effort, this is one of about 20 things that Heather and I are working on. So in the absence of dedicated staff to this, we don't really have the capacity to be chasing other money for this. I would love to see dedicated staff so that they could do that kind of work. And so that's why I feel like in future years that will open things up. But for now, this is in the absence of, trying to find some foundations or other groups like that to chip in. This is kind of what we're working with. So we gotta work what we have now and build up to something that's a little bit more ideal, I think. All right, so we are at 11:30 here. Thank you again, Wanya, for helping out today. Always good to see you. Are there other final thoughts before I summarize here and we move on?
How will we proceed with this allocation process? It sounds like it's a decision is really imminent, and how will that process go, and what will the AC3 be involved with in a review capacity?
Yeah, so the imminent decision, and my colleagues can correct me if I'm wrong here. The imminent decision is basically the split between money that we think should come from operating funds and money that we think should come from capital funds, as opposed to developing a full-out program for number 5, which we would need to do if we chose it. We don't need to do that right away. We would just need to decide, yeah, number 5 is a good idea, and let's put X number of thousands of dollars towards it. Number 6 is a good idea, let's put X number of $1,000 to it. That's more that split is the more pressing decision. And so we may want to consider having a fairly quick turnaround on a follow-up meeting with this group to talk into that a little bit deeper. And the same would go for the City Arts team.
Can the staff toss out a suggestion and then the rest of the committee have some time to digest and respond to that?
To a split?
Yeah. Would that be
sure. Yeah. Well, I would just be making up a number. I don't know if I want to do that.
Maybe it's over email in the next couple of days. I don't know. I'm just trying to think of how everybody stays involved, because I know we go away from each other for months at a time sometimes. So how we stay involved and also don't delay.
That's a good idea, Blue. Maybe I'll circle back with some of the CAT colleagues here, and we'll talk a little bit more about a concept of how these might be split so that everyone has something to react to, and then we can fine tune it. Does that sound reasonable?
In the interim too, if you guys have an idea of what size grant would be a good size grant, that could be helpful in considering, right?
For number 5?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Because it's, how many opportunities do we want to give, and how big should each of those grants be is kind of an important question for us to determine. I think we've heard 5 and 10,000, and maybe 10,000 is more preferable to 5, depending on organization, but we kind of rely on you all to let us know that.
I know this is a long conversation, and I know I'm talking a lot here, and there's so much to consider. I just want to toss out the kind of neatness and the cleanliness, conceptual cleanliness of us, focusing in a direction where the county is not. I do personally, at least, feel like the county is in motion, increasing their support for small organizations. In fact, they have quadrupled their support for small organizations in the last couple of years. So that pot is increasing, and they do have a well-oiled machine and a mechanism for funding small orgs. We can press them to do more of that. I wonder if it wouldn't behoove us to focus on a category of funding that the county cannot and will not at any time soon take on, and that's funding individual artists. So I wonder if 5 might just make more sense to focus on grants for artists. It's, the county
and
will
not-
never touch that.
And just to remind you, I have to leave, so I gotta go. So
All right, thank you, Anya.
thank you. Bye,
And
everyone.
Kevin and Heather, I could get in and have a chat with you guys and, you know, and it maybe further inform my perspective on that if you want.
I'm glad you raised that point, though. That is a good distinction within number 5, and that the county is working on the arts organizations. But so we'll have to talk about that to see is that feasible, and that might make some sense. Thank you for mentioning that. All right, great. Thanks, everybody. This has been really helpful. Really appreciate all of your perspectives. We'll put our heads together here internally and circulate an email on some thoughts and maybe some numbers to react to, and we'll go from there.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Great,
you.
thanks so much.
Bye, Brady.
Thank
Bye.
you.